way, everything that we've studied the last 30 years was thought to be impossible when we first began doing it. And what we've done is we've been using these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art measures to prove the power of these very simple and low-tech and low-cost and often ancient interventions. And part of what we're learning is how dynamic these processes are, how quickly you can get better. And so that reframes the reason for making these changes from fear of dying, which is too scary, or risk factor reduction, which is too boring, to joy of living. Because what's really sustainable, and I'll talk about this later, is joy and pleasure and freedom. And because these mechanisms are so dynamic, when you eat healthier, when you manage stress, when you exercise, when you love more, your brain actually gets more blood flow. So you think more clearly, you have more energy, you need less sleep. In fact, the latest studies are showing that your brain can grow so many new brain neurons that your brain can actually get measurably bigger. And that was thought impossible just a few years ago. Just walking in 2 studies, 3 hours for a week, for 3 months, caused so many new brain neurons to grow that the people's brains actually got bigger. I mean, that's crazy when you think about it. Because it used to be thought you just had a certain number of neurons, and if you went out and had some, partied too much on a weekend and lost a few thousand or a few million, depending on who it is, brain neurons, that was it. You just wouldn't get them back. And now we know our bodies are so much more plastic, so much more dynamic than we had once realized. And when we make these changes, we can actually measure how much better people can get. Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire talked about this, so it's not the science always lags behind the art. And it turns out that some of my favorite substances cause brain cells to grow. Chocolate, for example, and tea, and blueberries. These are things that get away from what you can't have to what can actually be beneficial. It's not just what you exclude in your diet, as I'll talk about in a minute, that's harmful. It's also what you include that's beneficial. Moderate alcohol increases brain cell growth, whereas excessive alcohol decreases it. Chronic stress decreases it, whereas stress management increases it. Believe it or not, even cannabinoids found in marijuana increase brain cell growth. I'm just the messenger here. What were we just talking about? Never mind. And also the usual suspects: saturated fat, cholesterol, sugar, nicotine, opiates, cocaine. These are things that, besides being bad for your heart, are bad for your brain and actually decrease brain cell growth. When you make these changes, your skin gets more blood flow, so you look better. You don't age as quickly because you have that nice glow that people get, as opposed to, if you know people who smoke, they have that kind of gray, ashen pallor. Christy Turlington, the supermodel, his father died of lung cancer, and so she has a wonderful website called SmokingIsUgly.com. And because to make the point that, smoking is marketed as making you beautiful, but it really makes you ugly. How sexy is that? And speaking of that, your sexual organs get less blood flow when you smoke, because nicotine makes your arteries constrict. So in your brain, that can cause a stroke. In your heart, it can cause a heart attack. But in your skin, it makes your skin wrinkle faster and gives you that ashen color that I mentioned. And in your sexual organs, it turns out that half of guys who smoke are impotent. How sexy is that? And so smoking is marketed as making you beautiful and sexy, and it really makes you ugly and impotent. So those are things that actually are much more powerful motivators of change than fear of dying, because it puts it into the present tense. And the California Department of Health Services did a wonderful series of ads where they had a guy dressed up like the Marlboro Man. And you notice the caption doesn't say heart attacks or lung cancer, it says impotence. You notice the limp cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Because that, again, puts it in present tense. And again, what's sustainable is pleasure and joy and freedom. And so it's not about fear of dying, it's about joy of living. Your heart gets more blood flow, so you can actually reverse heart disease. We're able to show for the first time that even severe heart disease can be reversed. And we've shown that in a series of studies, the most definitive of which was called the Lifestyle Heart Trial. And we looked at the amount of blockage in the coronary arteries, and we found that in the green line, after 1 year and after 5 years, the arteries got more and more clogged, whereas in the red line, they got less clogged after 1 year and even less blocked after 5 years. And so instead of getting worse and worse, people can get better and better. And these findings, again, are really empowering people with new hope and new choices, because it's saying, look, if you're willing to make these changes, you're likely to get better. There are no guarantees, but most people do get better, and more quickly than we had once realized. This is what reversing heart disease looks like, where the arrows are. In the upper left is a narrowing of one of the main arteries in the heart, and then a year later in the upper right, you can see it's wider. Usually it goes the other direction. It had never been shown that you could actually make them unclogged rather than get more and more clogged. And the lower left is a measure called a PET scan that measures blood flow to the heart. And you can see blue and black means no blood flow. And in the lower right, a year later, where it's all orange and white, is normal blood flow. So even small changes in severely blocked arteries can cause big improvements in blood flow. And what this means from a symptomatic standpoint, from a clinical sense, this is a guy who literally was riding a wheelchair around Walmart, he said. He couldn't go to his mailbox. He couldn't cross the street before the light changed, before getting chest pain. And within just a few months, a few weeks actually, he was pain-free. We found in all of our studies, a greater than 90% reduction in the frequency of chest pain just by changing lifestyle. And so that's what makes these changes sustainable, because when you do good things, you feel good, and when you do bad things, you feel bad. And then it comes out of people's own experience, not because some doctor or some book told them, but they see they can connect the dots between what they do and how they feel. And again, it's not all or nothing, as I'll talk about. But to the degree you make these changes, there's a corresponding benefit. We published this in the Journal of the American Medical Association. That was the conclusion. We found even more reversal after 5 years than after 1 year, and 2.5 times fewer cardiac events like heart attacks and strokes and bypasses and angioplasties. One of the most important findings we found in this study and in every study we've done was that the primary determinant of improvement wasn't how old or how sick people were, it was how much they changed. And see, I thought that the younger people who had less severe disease would be more likely to show reversal, but I was wrong. It wasn't how old or how sick they were, but the more they changed, the better they got.